The sun hung low over the prairie that afternoon, painting everything in shades of gold and amber as Martha stood on the wooden platform of the abandoned railway station wondering how her life had led her to this moment. She was 23 years old, wearing a tattered white dress that had once been her mother's wedding gown, and she was waiting for a man she had never met. The advertisement in the newspaper had been simple enough. Rancher seeking bride, stop must be of good character, stop will provide comfortable home, stop reply to James McCarthy, stop Salvation Creek, Wyoming. Martha had written back 3 times, and each letter from James had been kind and thoughtful, written in careful handwriting that spoke of a man who took his time with words. He had told her about his ranch, about the horses he raised, about the wildflowers that covered the hills in spring, and about how lonely the prairie could be for a man who lived there by himself. She had told him the truth about herself too, because Mama had always said that honesty was the foundation of everything good in this world. She told him she could read and write, that she could cook and sew, that she loved music even though she had never owned an instrument, and that she had never been with a man because there had never been time for courting when she was caring for her sick mother. When Mama passed last winter, Martha found herself alone in a boarding house in St. Louis with $3 to her name and a choice to make about what kind of future she wanted. James had sent money for the train ticket and a note that said, "Take your time, stop, no rush, stop, I will wait for you, stop." Now here she was standing barefoot because her only shoes had fallen apart somewhere in Kansas, watching a man on a black horse riding toward her across the golden grassland. James McCarthy was tall and weathered by sun and wind, probably in his early 40s, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He dismounted slowly and removed his hat, and Martha noticed his hands were trembling slightly. "Miss Martha," he said, and his voice was deep and gentle like distant thunder on a summer evening. "Mr. McCarthy," she replied, and they stood there looking at each other while the wind whispered through the dried grass around them. "I brought the wagon," he said, gesturing behind him where Martha now noticed a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 patient horses. "Thought you might have luggage." "Just this," Martha said, holding up a small carpetbag that contained everything she owned in the world. Something passed across James's face then, something that looked like understanding mixed with sadness, and he nodded slowly. "That's all right," he said. "That's just fine." They rode in comfortable silence for the first hour, and Martha watched the landscape roll by in endless waves of grass and sky. "It's beautiful here," she said finally. "It is," James agreed, "especially this time of year when everything turns gold. Stop, in spring it's all green and covered with flowers. Stop, purple and yellow and white as far as you can see." "I'd like to see that," Martha said. "You will," James promised, and then added quietly, "if you stay." Martha looked at him, then really looked at him, and saw a good man who had known loneliness and hard work, and who was trying very hard not to hope too much. "I'm a woman of my word, Mr. McCarthy," she said. "I came here to marry you and make a home, and that's what I intend to do if you'll have me." Something eased in James's shoulders then, and he nodded. "I'll do right by you, Martha," he said. "I promise you that." The ranch house was small but sturdy, built of logs with a stone chimney and a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Inside it was clean but sparse, with handmade furniture and windows that let in the golden afternoon light. "It's not much," James said, standing in the doorway looking uncertain. "It's wonderful," Martha said, and she meant it, because after months of living in a cramped boarding house room, this felt like a palace. That evening they were married by the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through and who agreed to stop at the ranch for the ceremony. The preacher's wife stood as witness, and she hugged Martha afterward and whispered, "He's a good man, stop, be patient with him." After the preacher left, James made dinner, which surprised Martha because she had expected to do the cooking. "Figured you'd be tired from traveling," he said as he served stew and fresh bread. They ate quietly, and then James showed Martha to the bedroom. "I'll sleep out here," he said, gesturing to a bedroll by the fireplace. "Until you're ready, stop, no rush, stop, take all the time you need." Martha felt tears prick her eyes because she had heard stories from other women about wedding nights, about men who took what they wanted without care or gentleness. "Thank you," she whispered. "Nothing to thank me for," James said. "You're my wife now, and I'll treat you with respect. Stop, that's just how it should be." Weeks passed, and Martha settled into life on the ranch. She learned the rhythms of the land, the way the light changed with the seasons, the sound of coyotes at night and the morning chorus of birds. James taught her to ride, and she proved to be a natural, sitting tall in the saddle with her hair streaming behind her. She cooked meals and tended the vegetable garden and began making curtains for the windows using fabric that James brought back from town. They talked in the evenings sitting on the porch watching the sun set over the prairie. James told her about his life, about growing up in Missouri, about coming west after the war, about building the ranch with his own two hands. Martha told him about her childhood, about her mother's long illness, about the books she loved to read and the songs she wished she could play. I always wanted a piano, she admitted one evening. Mama said I had a gift for music, but we never had money for lessons or an instrument. James didn't say anything, but Martha saw him nod thoughtfully. They had been married for 2 months when Martha finally asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. They were sitting by the fire after dinner and James was mending a saddle while Martha worked on her sewing. James, she said quietly, why did you marry me? He looked up surprised by the question. Because I needed a wife, he said simply. But why me? Martha pressed. You could have found someone closer. Stop someone with money or education. Stop someone who came with more than just a carpetbag. James set down the saddle and looked at her with those kind eyes. Your letters, he said. You wrote about your mama. Stop, about how you cared for her all those years even when it meant giving up your own dreams. Stop, you wrote about wanting a simple life. Stop, about finding beauty in small things. Stop, a sunset. Stop, a bird's song. Stop, the smell of bread baking. He paused and Martha saw him swallow hard. I didn't want a woman who came here expecting fancy things, he continued. I wanted someone who understood that life out here is hard sometimes, but that it can be good too if you have someone to share it with. Stop, someone who sees the beauty in it. Martha felt warmth spread through her chest. I do see it, she said softly. Every day I see it. That night as they prepared for bed, Martha made a decision. James, she called out as he was laying out his bedroll. He turned to look at her. I'm ready, she said simply. Understanding dawned on his face, followed quickly by concern. Martha, you don't have to stop, there's no rush. I know, she said, but I want to stop. I want to be your wife in every way. James crossed the room slowly and took her hands in his. I'll be gentle, he promised. I'll take care with you. I know you will, Martha said, because after 2 months of living with this man she knew his character and she trusted him completely. Later as they lay together in the darkness, Martha's head resting on James's chest, listening to his heartbeat, she felt a completeness she had never known before. James, she whispered. Yes. There's something I need to tell you. She felt him tense slightly beneath her. What is it? When I said I wanted you to give me the full 11 inches, Martha said, feeling her face flush even in the darkness, I was talking about the curtain rod. There was a moment of absolute silence and then James began to laugh. It started as a chuckle deep in his chest and then grew until he was shaking with laughter, tears streaming down his face. The curtain rod, he gasped between fits of laughter. Yes, Martha said, starting to laugh herself. I measured the window this morning and I needed exactly 11 inches for the rod I'm making. Stop, I was going to ask you at dinner but I forgot, and then when you came to bed I remembered. James laughed until he couldn't breathe and Martha laughed with him, and somewhere in that laughter all the tension and uncertainty of the past months dissolved. Martha McCarthy, James said when he could finally speak, you are the most wonderful woman I have ever known. Even though I'm terrible at timing, she said. Especially because of that, he said and kissed her forehead. The next morning James rode into town and came back with not just the curtain rod but something else too. It was an upright piano, scratched and worn but lovingly maintained. Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house was selling it, James explained as he and 2 hired hands carefully carried it into the house. Her daughter got married and moved east and she didn't want it anymore. Stop, figured you might like it. Martha stood with her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. James, she whispered, you can't stop, this must have cost. Doesn't matter what it cost, James interrupted gently. You said you always wanted one. Stop, now you have one. Martha sat down at the piano that afternoon and began to play. Her fingers remembered the patterns she had practiced on tabletops and windowsills all those years ago, and soon the small ranch house was filled with music. James stood in the doorway listening with a smile on his face. That night they made love again, and this time there was no awkwardness or uncertainty, just 2 people who had found each other across the vast loneliness of the prairie and who were building something good together. Years passed and the ranch prospered. Martha's garden grew and she began selling vegetables and preserves in town. James's horse breeding operation became known throughout the territory and buyers came from as far away as Denver. They added rooms to the house and filled them one by one with children. 3 daughters and 2 sons, all of them growing up with music and laughter and the endless space of the prairie to run in. Martha taught them to read and to play piano and to see the beauty in the world around them. James taught them to ride and to care for animals and to keep their word no matter what. On quiet evenings when the children were asleep, Martha and James would sit on the porch as they had done from the very beginning, watching the sun set over the grassland. Do you ever regret it? James asked one evening when they were both gray-haired and worn by years of hard work and good living. Coming out here, stop marrying a stranger. Martha took his hand, weathered and strong, and squeezed it gently. Not for one single day, she said. You gave me everything I ever wanted. Stop a home, stop a family, stop music, stop love. You gave me more. James said. You gave me a reason. Stop. Before you came, I was just existing out here. Stop going through the motions. Stop. You made it all mean something. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one across the darkening sky. James, Martha said eventually. Yes. I still can't believe you thought I was asking for something else that night. James laughed, the same deep laugh that still made Martha's heart flutter after all these years. In my defense, he said, it was a very confusing request given the timing. I suppose it was, Martha agreed, smiling. Best misunderstanding of my life though, James said, and pulled her close. And there, under the vast prairie sky, with the sound of crickets singing and the wind whispering through the grass, they sat together as they had done for decades, grateful for the kindness that had brought them together and for all the beautiful ordinary days that had followed.